Hi there, welcome to Floating in Books. This is my reading wrap-up for July. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This is going to be a quick roundup review of all of the books that I've read since I last did this video, which I think was the end of April. So this is what I read in the past 3 months, and there are 9 books here. Some of them a little bit chunky. I've got 3 audiobooks and 6 regular copies. So let me talk to you about the audiobooks first. So the first audiobook that I finished in the past couple of months is They Both Die at the End by Silvera. And this book is one that was really popular back in the day when I was watching a lot of BookTube, and everybody loved this book. And I found it as an audiobook on Storytel and thought, why not read this? This is sort of like YA contemporary where 2 boys live in this old alternate universe who are notified that they're going to die. So within this world, there is a company who can predict that people are going to die that day, and around midnight they get the call, and then for the next 24 hours, they know they're gonna pass away in one way, shape, or form. And then they're called deckers, and these deckers like do things, they're like special forums and stuff. And these 2 boys both get the call. They are from completely different like backgrounds, but somehow they end up meeting, and it's just like chance of events. And one of them is a bit more introverted and doesn't come out the door much, doesn't go out the door much, and the other boy is a little bit more outgoing, and they kind of influence each other. This is a very endearing story. I only gave it 3 stars though, because I didn't feel the change of perspectives really added much to the story. Because apart from the 2 main characters, we also got a lot of input from a lot of the side characters. Like there's this famous person and some journalist and the lady who makes the call. And I'm pretty sure that those are ploys to try and get the story, like to give it more depth. But to me, it really pulled me out of the relationship between these 2 main characters. And that's why I was listening to the book. So for me, that changing POV and having all these like meaningless characters, like some of them were important for the 2 main characters, so those kind of sidetracking POVs I didn't mind all that much. But I think it was an attempt to make the world bigger and to show that this was like a whole thing that was going on like in the world, and that it didn't just affect these 2 characters. But to me it just felt a bit cheap, and it just added pages to the book. And I also felt that despite the tone of voice from the narrator being different for all of these characters, I think they even had different characters who were narrating, like different people who were narrating different people, which I think added to the story a lot. But because the tone of voice of the style of writing for all of these characters was pretty much the same, I didn't really feel like they really sounded any different to me. So I felt the 2 main characters were very nicely fleshed out, very endearing, as I said. This definitely made me cry towards the end of as well. But the rest of the characters of the cast that was in this book, I just didn't really feel it added anything. Then the next book was a very snarky, cheek and tongue, sort of contemporary fiction story. This is How to Kill Your Family by Mackie. This I also gave 3 stars, and I'm actually thinking, should I knock it down to 2? But I think that's a little too harsh, but this just wasn't really good overall. For me, it's like a 2.5 star rating, I think. Overall, I think the concept of this is really fun. However, I just became so annoyed by the main character. So this is a first-person POV story of a woman who was born to a single mom, and her dad ends up being this like really rich person who she's never been in touch with. They were like a fling, it kind of happened, and she has taken this as like, you guys are also my family, and why do you ignore me? And she sets off on this killing spree to sort of, off them all so she can get away with the money. That's sort of the idea, the entire premise of this. And this is no secret because it's called How to Kill Your Family. So she details how she goes about it, how she does this. She's cold-hearted, she's witty at first, but as I mentioned, the snark of this main character really, really became annoying after like the first murder that she talks about, because she just becomes so, like, the more the background of her life is revealed, the more her motives for committing these murders, like, is there ever a motive that can warrant a murder? I don't think so. But the more flimsy the motive becomes, because it's like, why? Why is this the reason why you want to kill all of these different people? She even ends up liking some of them, because in order to kill some of them, she has to like become pretty close to them and befriend them. But the more she learns about these people, it's like she's just completely not open to their side of the story, and she just keeps going on her individual path that she apparently already decided on when she was a teenager. I mean, she even ends up like completely doing something weird with her best friend's fiance. I think she's just secretly in love with him. She's just an incredibly vapid, jealous, incredibly selfish person. So while the first couple of chapters, I definitely had to chuckle with how cheek and tongue everything was and how she described things, about a third way through the book, I was like, is this all we're gonna get? And it was just a repetition of more of the same. I definitely think the ending of this book kind of redeemed it, and that's why I gave it 3 stars in the end, because I do like how she is sort of bested at her own game at a certain point in time. I won't say too much about it because that's going to give away the plot twist, but the plot twist felt cheap. It felt like an easy cop-out to try and make this book more interesting than it was. It was okay as an audiobook. When it comes to audiobooks, I very often don't give more than 3 stars because I tend to go for things that are like easy to consume, because I listen to this when I'm like doing chores in my house or like getting ready in the morning, and I definitely don't want anything that's like too like much like sucking me into the story. So that definitely goes into it here as well. So How to Kill Your Family was okay, it was enjoyable, but I'm really glad I never bought it as a physical copy because I would never go back to this. Then the last audiobook I listened to was Saskia Klaaysen, Prikkels, Bijten, Niet. And this is a non-fiction book. It's an informative book about HSS, which stands for highly sensitive sensation seeker. So within the highly sensitive spectrum, there are now subcategories that are being identified. That's sort of the premise of the book. And I listened to this because I like listening to things about mental health and like personal growth and things like that. And I have definitely found in myself that there are certain quirks that I have in my personality that sort of border on the highly sensitive spectrum for sure. So I was interested in this topic to begin with, but this is such a contrived, pseudo-scientific read that it just became so annoying. It became really repetitive towards the end as well. The only research this author has done is that she put out a questionnaire amongst people who think they are high HSS. Which I'm like, of course you're then going to get a lot of results from people describing things, what it's like to be HSS. So I'm always like, there's no control group here, but it's presented in a very scientific way. At least that's what the author wants you to believe. So for me, the way everything was set up, and it just became more and more annoying as the book progressed, because the first couple of chapters really sort of try to like make the link between like what we know about like highly sensitive people and like HSP and those kind of things, and then like sort of making it the subcategory. But once it got to like, how do you deal with this and how do you sort of live your life if you deal with these aspects, that then it became like more and more like a traditional self-help book that they always give me the ick. I mean, I've also read one of the Brené Brown books, and I know she's a very popular author, but to me, it just felt like so many open doors that were just already being kicked in, and I felt the same way with this book. At first, I thought it was fun that there were these personal anecdotes dispersed throughout the book, making it like making you feel like, oh yes, like this. But then towards the end of the book, I felt it was like the same three people that she had sourced a lot of these anecdotes from. So also there, I really felt that the book was lacking. And like I mentioned, it became very repetitive towards the end. I felt that a lot of the things that were said at the end of the book could have already been introduced when the other part of the book was introduced. So the first 2 to 3, maybe 4 or 5 chapters were all right, but after that it just became drivel, and I definitely felt my attention also like just not being there with the book. So I kind of had to push myself through it, and that's why I only gave this 2 stars. It was like recognizable in some places for me, for sure. But at some points I was also like, no, this is not the way you go about these things. So if anyone knows of any like more like scientific kind of books that talk about highly sensitive sensation seekers, then I would love to get your recommendations, because this Dutch one was no bueno. And then in order of appearance, and like the order that I read them, I ended up reading 9 books in total in the past 3 months, which is pretty good for me. And some of them are also really, really chunky. I read 3 books on paper that are over 500 pages. The first one I finished is Jade Legacy by Fonda. This is like 750 pages or something like that. That's just over 700. And this was the final book in the Greenbone saga. And there was a lot that this book needed to do, and I definitely felt that it didn't quite manage to do it. It felt a bit melodramatic in certain places. However, I really, really enjoy the series, and I therefore still gave it 4 stars at the end. This was decent, but I definitely felt that it was trying to do a little bit too much, hence the length, and I definitely wanted to have more focus on like where everything would go after the second novel, and I didn't get enough of that, I felt. So knocked it down, 1 star for that, but I really enjoy this series. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the first book is about, because this last book doesn't make any sense if you haven't read the other 2. So in the first book, we meet the Cull family, and they are one of 2 leading factions within this world where Jade can be worn and used by warriors to enhance their powers and sort of get like superpowers. And you're born with this ability. You can wear the Jade and use it. And there's this whole world where sometimes Jade is frowned upon, and only in their world. And we get a lot of this like more international perspective already in the second book, which I really enjoyed. And we get even more of it in the third book, and therefore I felt the focus was kind of gone from the original setup of this entire story, which is the rivalry between the 2 factions. That I felt was just like now no longer the main focus, and we got a lot of politics, and not always, I just felt the book wasn't always like on point, on like focusing on the thing that was important for the storytelling. So this meandered a lot, but I still really enjoyed it. Fonda can write a good story, and I really enjoyed this trilogy for sure, so that's why it was 4 stars. And because I have been stuck in this like fantasy rut for a while, I was like, I always like to change things up, so I decided to go for this. This is Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield. This is just over 500 pages, and I showed you this in my spring book recommendations, and I definitely put it on my own TBR as well for that reason. This is a book that has been sitting on my shelves for quite some time, and I just had never gotten around to it. And this was lovely. This was a really lovely book. It was perhaps a little bit dark for spring, but because it sort of talks about like the way the Thames River sort of moves, and you get all of these different seasons as this story unravels, I definitely think it still has spring-like aspects to it. It's very sort of like focused on the river and sort of like mysteries that revolve around the river, and I thought that was very enjoyable. I ended up giving it, let me take a peek at my Goodreads. This ended up being a 4-star read for me as well. Here again, I felt like some aspects weren't fleshed out the way I'd wanted to, and towards the end it felt a little bit rushed, and that to me made it a little less enjoyable. So in case you don't know what this book is about, this is starts when a group of people are drinking in a tavern, and a complete stranger walks through the door, collapses with a child in his arms, and the child appears to be dead. Everybody confirms she's not breathing, But then, as the midwife, I think is called, she's the only healthcare professional. This is set in like the 19th century, so not like modern day. The child is revived, and everybody is like coming to this tavern the next day. The story gets told, and everybody becomes involved that lives around this area, and everybody comes to this tavern to see this miraculous child, you could say. The stranger is a photographer, and he ends up returning to the area a couple of times after he's healed up. And everybody's like sort of like talking about the mystery and the miraculous regeneration of this child. And then there's this family that becomes involved. There's another character. Like, everything ends up being tied together, but the author wanted to tie it up a little bit too neatly at the end. So for me, it really didn't have to be this neatly at the end, but yeah, it was very enjoyable. This is very whimsical and enjoyable. I definitely think this is great also for autumn time if you're looking for a cozy mystery kind of book. And also if you like some local folklore, then this is a good one. Just over 500 pages then. I just kept the tomes rolling for a second there. I ended up reading this. This is Rin Chapecco's Silver Under Nightfall. And I ended up reading this because so many people on TikTok were saying this was their favorite book of 2023. A lot of those people got it as an arc though, so I was like, not sure if I'm going to like it, because very often if things are popular on social media, they do not end up being my favorites. But this had a lot of tropes in that usually really appeal to me. This is sort of like part of the vampire revival that we're having at the minute, because this is essentially a vampire novel. There are 4 different courts, maybe 5. One of them collapsed. And we follow a main character who is a vampire slayer. He is human, but he can take some sort of potion, and then he can like sort of meet the vampire strength and speed. And his dad is like one of the most infamous vampire slayers of the country. However, he's also shunned by high society, and this has definitely left a mark on the boy. Also because his mom once ran away, and when she gave birth to him, it was very, very unclear what his parentage actually was, and people think he's part vampire. So there is sort of like the father-son relationship that goes into it, but also his sort of ability to be very diplomatic, and actually he's not that bad of a person. And this was really enjoyable. I ended up giving it 4 stars as well. No 5-star reads for me this time around. 5 stars are really, for me, the cream of the crop, you could say. I don't give 5 stars easily to books. But yeah, Silver Under Nightfall was very enjoyable. This was incredibly fast-paced. I flew through this. It had intrigue, it had politics, it had a lot going for it, and now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, this should have been perhaps 5 stars, because I don't remember exactly what I knocked it the 1 star down for. I think it was just a little bit, again, too convenient at times. Like, some of the plot twists were a little too easy, a little bit too, like, not really surprising to me. So to me, it wasn't, therefore, not like the best book ever. Like, if it can surprise me, I'm really happy about that. But there were definitely some plot twists towards the end where I was like, again, feels a bit cheap. But overall, I thought this was a very enjoyable book. I believe it's the first book in a series. Don't know when the second one is coming out. But yeah, this is a very, very enjoyable book, and I hope there's more of this. Then I wanted to keep the fantasy train rolling, and I still have a couple of books left in the Invisible Library series by Genevieve Cogman. This is The Dark Archive. After this, there is one more book left, and then I will have finished the series, and I will have read all of these. This is a incredibly fun, cozy, fantasy sort of story. I find them very cozy. We follow the main character, Irene, and in the first book, we are introduced to all of her friends who help her on her quests to find books for the Invisible Library. There is an arch nemesis that we meet along the way. There's also a lot of politics involved in this world, but these are quick, easy, breezy reads. These are definitely not very, they're not trying to be more than they are, and that's why I appreciate them. Like, with some books, I feel like they're just trying to pretend like they're, with a lot of YA and a lot of the, dark romantasy sort of recommendations I see people give on Facebook, on TikTok. I'm like, yes, they're probably really enjoyable, but when books are trying to like pretend like they're high literature when they're not, I'm like, and this book just knows it's fun. Every character in this book is written in a way that you just know it's there to have a fun time. There's a Sherlock Holmes kind of character in this story that always cracks me up. But yeah, this story, I don't know where it's gonna go in the last book, because there's definitely like a bit of a cliffhanger again at the end. But yeah, so far I think this is a very enjoyable series, and if you like very sort of low stakes fantasy but that's still very action packed and like really fun to read, then I think this is a good series to try. After all of that fantasy, I had to read something else, and I decided to go for something completely differently. This is a Dutch, well, a Flemish author actually. Griet op de beek, vele hemels boven de zevende. So in case you don't know, a couple of years ago I asked a lot of my friends and family, what Dutch books do you recommend me to read? And I slowly but surely acquired all of them, and now I'm slowly but surely making my way through all of them. So I figured it was time to read something in Dutch again. So, as I mentioned, this is written in, well, Dutch, Flemish, you could say, because Griet op de Beek is from Belgium, but we kind of understand each other quite well, so we can definitely read that. And this, it takes a little while for you to understand where the story might go, but we follow five different characters, and they all have different ages, and their tones of voices are really well executed. That was definitely a thing here. And this story is very much about family, about relationships, about coming to terms or not coming to terms with tragedy and trauma and those kind of things. So this book has some really heavy subjects in, and it becomes really heavy towards the end. This definitely made me cry. I ended up only giving it 3 stars because I really felt this book dragged a lot in the middle. It starts off fine, but before you understand how all these characters know each other, because they all know each other, it becomes a little like you first need to figure that out, and then you need to sort of like get to know their characters for the finale. So for me, this book is set into 3 parts. And if the finale hadn't been what it was, this could have easily been a 2-star read, because this meandered and it was so... Some of the characters just weren't enjoyable to read from. And that's, I think, the biggest drawback to this book, is that it's very much about people who do not deal with their lives and the cards they've dealt with. Everybody in this book just ignores everything. And I'm like... So it was a pretty like heavy topic to talk about it, and therefore I gave it 3 stars. I definitely felt there was like a different solution that could have happened here for sure. But yeah, it's a good study of humanity, so therefore 3 star. So therefore 3 stars indeed. And the final book, I just finished it last night. I stayed up so I could finish it because I wanted to film this video. But this is Blood Rights by Jim Butcher. This is the 6th book, I think. Is it the 6th one? Let me look it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is book number 6 in the Dresden Files. And this was 3 stars. 3 stars. The Dresden Files is, again, pretty okay. It's urban fantasy. It is, again, very action-packed, and the main character, Harry Dresden, is a wizard in Chicago who takes care of business. He works together with the police. And I think these are enjoyable reads, but these definitely have their flaws. There are definitely certain moments where you're like, really? So some of the things the main character says and does around women especially is very much frowned upon within the bookish community. I never let that deter me from how much I enjoy a book. I just understand that that's also the way some people view the world. So to me, that's not necessarily something that I take huge issue with, that I need to drop down the book. And this is a series where I've heard that the first couple of books are not as good, and that this series only gets better as Jim Butcher as a writer grows. I think the first book in this series, Stormfront, was written when he was still a college student, and this is one of the longest running fantasy series on the planet. There are like 16 books out in this, I believe. So I still have a long way to go. I tend to read one and then buy the next one, so that when I feel like something quick and easy, I can just pick something up, something fun. These books always get me out of reading slumps. They always prevent reading slumps for me. So for me, it's again, something I don't think too much about. It's just fantasy, it's vampires, it's magic, it's action, and there's a lot of politics going on behind the scenes. But especially in this book, I felt that we didn't really get a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. It was just a lot of complaining, and the fact that most of the action takes place on an adult movie set also felt a little bit like cheap and cheesy and just I like the last half of the book better than I did the first half of the book, so that's why I could like keep reading so much at the end, because then we're more like drawn into a vampire court, and that was far more interesting than the first half of the book where it's like, what are you doing? So this book was enjoyable indeed, so that's why it was 3 stars, but nothing to write home about. Like, this is never going to be a 5-star read for me, I think. Those are all of the books that I ended up reading in May, June, and July, so another 3 months down the belt. I am currently in the midst of my summer vacation as I'm filming this and as you're watching this, so I have 5 weeks of leisure time, which always seems like a lot, but it always flies by, especially if you have so many nice books to read behind you. So I actually will be traveling. But I also wanted to show you already what book I will be reading next. This is Blue Sister by Coco Mellors. This was gifted to me for my birthday, so I was like, I'm going to get through it straight away, and I hope to be able to finish this before I go on to my trip. And then for the trip, I ended up buying one of these guys. I bought a Kobo, an e-reader, because I will be traveling for 10 days, and I was like, I'm going to be on trains a lot. I will be vlogging everything, so you will see a vlog at some point in August of what I actually did. I'm not going to say too much about it, but I will be traveling by train, so I need to carry my own luggage. And I was like, I'm not going to pack heavy books. Also, next year, I potentially want to travel to Japan for a few weeks, and I was like, I always read a lot on vacation, so I might as well get an e-reader, and this will also allow me to make it a little easier for me to read in the winter time, because I always struggle with daylight in the winter time. For some reason, I'm just a daylight reader. I like to read when it's light out, and I don't need to read by lamplight. For some reason, I just don't enjoy that very much, but hopefully this will make it easier, and I can keep reading a bit more in the winter time as well if I have this. I just loaded it up. I took out a Kobo Plus subscription for the time being. It's free for the first month, so we'll see how that goes. And I did buy like 1 or 2 books to have on here forever, just to have some interesting things to read. So I hope I can have some interesting things there. I have already selected what I would like to start off with. There's already like 10 books on here now, so I need to get to reading. But first I'm going to read another paper copy before I leave, hopefully, and then I can get into the e-reader. So thank you so very much for joining me here today. Thumbs up the video if you liked it, and I hope you'd like to consider subscribing. I talk on this channel about books, fashion, and also some like lifestyle-y things. So if that's something you enjoy, then I hope you'd like to stay tuned for more, and I hope to see you again next week for a new video. Bye-bye!